Hey guys, welcome to a tutorial about UI pointers. Normally when you get VRIF you only get one pointer, and a lot of you would like both pointers to work exactly the way Oculus Home or something like that works, where it just switches back and forth automatically. Notice there's no trigger input, it's just switching in between the inputs, and that's the active one. If I've got them both, then I can switch in between the pointers with inputs. It's kind of hard to show with the emulator, but it will. Using your triggers, it'll switch in between the two pointers. So let's just do that, and then if I do that, it then switches to that one, and back and forth. Okay, so I've also added haptic feedback to UI elements that will add to this, so that when you go over a button, it will send a haptic feedback to your controller when you go over top of it, to give you an example of that. And you can also see that I've dynamically made it change the color to give you something to build off of for that. So notice this one doesn't have it turned on. This one does. And both are giving haptic feedback, and we can select things. If I can find my right button, let's see. There we go. If I can point at, kind of hard to see on the screen, but it's checked. Normally what you would get with VRIF framework is this. Just one pointer, and that's it. So we're going to go over how to do that, and an explanation of that is Unity's event system only allows for one graphics raycaster to be assigned, so you have to dynamically switch it and then update the system. And we're going to go over it, and I'll show you the scripts, and I'll make them available in the download, and we'll go through the setup and how this works. So stick with me if that's something you are wondering how to do. Okay, so I'm just in the empty scene from BNG Framework. So I've already installed BNG Framework. If you go in that folder and you go over to Scenes, and then you just open Empty, and that's where I'm at. So the first thing we're going to do is get the desk out of the way. I'm going to go and unpack this rig. It's just a good practice when you're making a variation of it to unpack it, make all your changes, then make a new prefab. That way you've always got your original prefab to fall back on. So I go back into BNG Framework, and let's go into prefabs. And if you scroll down here, you'll see there's a UI example. This is the same one that's in the demo scene. So let's just pull it in. We're going to zero it out, 0, 0, 0, and zero out the rotation, and then we'll just pull it back away from it so we got something to work on. Now come over here with the highlight and press T, and then we're going to pull it down so that we can actually get all of our inputs here just for testing. Okay, file, save. Let's hit play. I've just got the emulator I'm using here. And you can see everything's working. Okay, so I just went up a little bit. So if I click over on scene and I grab my pull-up tool, let's just pull it up and then come back over on the game, and then you can see, okay, we're good. And then come over to UI example, grab the Y, control copy, play, hit the UI example, control V. That'll pull it to where we want it. File, save your work. Okay. First things first, open up your XR rig, come down to your player rig, expand it all out. You can actually hit Alt and then click all this stuff, but it'll expand everything, and I don't want everything. I'm not all about that. Come down to your left pointer, enable it. You can see now we have another pointer, but it's misaligned. So let's come down here to our right controller, right hand pointer. We want to copy this transform, copy the component, come up to your left hand, then paste component values, and then let's see, what was it? It is a negative on the X, so negative, and then negative on the Y. And now we have both our pointers aligned up. So now if we hit play, notice we have both pointers, but they're lined up with each other. But again, the only one that works is the right pointer. So file, save. Next, we're going to have to do some things. So the way this works is on the event system. If you looked at this, or yeah, on the event system here, you'll see you've got an input right trigger and you've got a selected and right hand. Now, if you just wanted to switch this to where it was left only, you could just switch this out. But to dynamically switch this, you have to do it in code. You have to clear some things and you have to run some functions. So we're going to go over that now. So first thing we need to do is we need to understand that the line render is this part, and then it spawns a cursor. So if we come down to our UI pointer, notice we have a left and a right. Let's open that up. This script is responsible for assigning everything to the event system, and also it controls the line render and the cursor. We want this to still control the event system and do everything that it does, but we do not want it controlling the cursor, and we don't want it controlling the line render. We're going to write a script to overwrite that. And the reason for that is if we just switch it out and we just leave the script the way it is that the dominant hand will still make both pointers disappear. We don't want that. We want it to act like Oculus, where whatever's pointed at the canvas, if one hand leaves, that one becomes the dominant hand automatically without you doing anything. Whichever one leaves, the other one that's still pointed at it, that's the one that can do the pointing. We don't want them both disappearing. So essentially, we need to remove all of that from this, and we're going to do that with an override. We're not going to change this script. Notice here it's getting its cursor. It says if cursor. Well, cursor is a game object, and that's a spawning thing, so it's going to instantiate the cursor. So the only thing that we have to do here is leave this null, and it won't do anything with the cursor. Just don't assign anything. The line render, unfortunately, is not like that, and we can't override awake. So the line render, it just gets it. So I'm going to show you how I took care of that. But essentially, you could just get rid of this in this script. But again, if you update VRIF down the line, you're going to have to remember you did that. So if we do it with an override, you don't have to remember anything. So basically, we just need this script to keep all the event functions, leave the line render and the cursor alone. We're going to handle that in another script as well as the switching. So first things first, let's create an override. So let's come over our assets. Let's create a new folder. Oops. Create folder. Scripts. We'll come in here. Come on. Create a new C# script, and we'll call it UI pointer override. What are you doing? Yada, 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 yada. Come on. Alright, so open that up. Now in here, get rid of our start and our update functions. Up here we just want using PNG, and then we don't want this to derive from mono behavior. We want this to get its info from UI pointer that derives from mono behavior. So that way we have complete control of overriding the script. So what we want to do is we want to go public override. If I can type today. Override void update pointer. Now, the only thing in update pointer that we don't want to run is the line. We don't want the line renderer, and because that's done in awake, we can't override it. But what we can do is say if line renderer does not equal null, just say line render equals null. There you go. So what we just did with that override is we basically said that after it got an awake, get rid of it. There you go. So now that that line render is now null in this, it will not run any of the logic for the line renderer. So if we come down all the way down here under update pointer, you can see that it says if line renderer, it'll run this. Well, if it's null, it's not going to run any of this logic. So we just nulled it out, so now none of this runs. Okay, good. Problem taken care of. Next, we want public override void hide pointer. We don't want to run the base. We don't want to run anything in here. We don't want any logic at all. We're just throwing in a safety that says that if this happens, return. Do nothing. And hide pointer, what it's doing is it's actually setting things active, and it's enabling and disabling the line render and the cursor. So we don't want it to do that. So just don't run base and just return. So if this gets ran, it just returns. It does absolutely nothing. That's all you need in this override. So save that up, come back over, come down to your left-hand pointer, and we want to keep this for now so you can see the settings, right? So we want UI pointer. Here's our new override. We want it to be on the left hand, okay? We don't want to assign anything to either one of these. And that's it. That's all. Okay, for your override. Pretty sure. Let me check and make sure, but yep, that's pretty much what we want to do. Okay, moving on. Now, well, before we move on, let's go ahead and put that script on our right hand, and we're going to do the same thing. We want this one to be right, and we want this one to be left. Okay, then make sure you disable the UI pointer on both. Okay, so our setup is going to require us to bring the actual UI pointer into the hierarchy here. So if you go up here to cursor, just click on it. That'll find the prefab. And let's just make one a child of the left-hand pointer. There it is. Boom. And then one a child of the right-hand pointer. And you can go ahead and disable both of them. Control, disable. That's going to be the graphic for the cursor that appears at the end of these line renderers. Next, let's go back to our scripts folder. And let's create a new script. And we'll call it pointer switching. Okay, this script is going to be responsible for handling the switching back and forth automatically and all that stuff. This is going to take over for all those parts that we just did an override for. I'm just going to copy and paste this and then quickly go over what's going on, and then you can modify it to fit your needs. It's kind of a long script, but keep in mind it's only controlling the line renderer and the cursor. Don't forget to add our libraries. So they are these. Actually get rid of collections and event systems. Control save. And oh, I know what that is, because that is the dynamic color that we have not created yet. Yep. And that's okay. We're going to go over that. So pay no attention to these errors right now. We're going to create this script, and that is how we're going to dynamically change the color of the line renderer and the cursor. So up and start, we're just getting a a reference to our VRUI system, which is what handles the input, our input bridge. For the cursor, this is for scaling. I gave scaling in this just like there was in the original UI pointer. And then it's getting our laser line, and this is for our original color and our start color, because we're going to be dynamically starting, changing the color to give you an example of this. So we need to store the original color, which is white, and then when we move off of it, it'll restore it to this. Do graphics raycast. Okay, this part right here is what handles all the input for the switching. Now you can move this to bindings, or you can move it to a switch. I wanted to make it long-handed so you can see exactly how this is working. This first part, it says if other UI pointer hit found and hit found. So if both of your pointers are pointed at the canvas, they both got a hit, both pointers are on there. This is where it does the switching in between the two using your triggers. So if my hand side is right and a right trigger is down, use this hand is going to equal true. So it'll say this hand. If the hand side is left and I hit the right trigger, it's false. Use this hand as false, right? Because we're using the left. And then it just does that again. If the hand side is left and left trigger down, then use this hand as true, because I want to use my left hand, and then so on. If this controller is the right hand and I click the left trigger, use this hand equals false. So they're just working in tandem together. The pointers are talking to each other to switch back and forth. Now, if you've only got one pointer hitting, it's just going to say use this hand. So if you have both pointers hitting and then you move one off, it's going to select the hand that's looking at it. That's this function, part of the function. This is the function. Once this runs, it's going to say if use this hand. So this is the function that runs that sets the input for the VR input system. So once the selection is made, it'll see what you've done, and then it's going to update the VR UI system. So that's what this function does. So we're assigning the hand side to it, and then we're running a function within that script for that, and then we're going to decide if we're left or right, and then we run clear all to clear the info out to reset it. So, and then this is the update visuals. This is the part that this changes the line renderer and the mouse. So basically we're just doing a raycast. We're going to put a collider behind the UI. This is the way curved UI handles it, and some other systems handle it, is they have to do a physical raycast. Because remember, graphics raycast is only supported by one in the event system. So we have to use raycast to actually switch these to get that dynamic switching effect. And that's how we can switch in between the two, depending on which one is pointed at it. The laser line, this is just setting the position, how far in it goes. So it's just from your hand to where it hit. Don't read too much into this. I'm not going to go into too far. It's going to make the video too long if I go down the rabbit hole. This is just where we're going to switch the dynamic color. So basically when you hit it, it's going to look for dynamic color. And if we're using dynamic color, it's going to say, okay, the releasing object, I'll show you that in a second. It's going to say, okay, if we've got it checked that we want to use dynamic color, it'll change the color back and forth when you go over top of it. Releasing object is, if you come over to your event system, you can see it has a releasing object. This is never null if you're pointing at something. The other two do become null because you're not pressing it or you're dragging it, but this won't be null. When you go over top of it, it's going to always be something, and then if it's not, it just won't dynamically change the color. Going on down, this is what controls our cursor scale. We're going to set it active. Then we're going to move its position to the hit position, which is wherever the line cast or the raycast hit is, just like a bullet prefab or something. And then we're just going to, transform its scale depending on our scale settings and the distance, etc. And the rotate, we're just going to rotate it to the hit point, etc. This is pretty much just like a bullet tag. And then if we're going to use this hand and we're using dynamic graphics, the dynamic color of the cursor will change. This is that script we still need to recreate so that the cursor and the line renderer match. You can actually change those in the code that we're going to create to where you can make them two different colors if you really wanted to. And then this just handles an else statement. So if none of that's true, then it's going to disable our laser line, which is the line, and then the cursor, it's going to disable that. So if none of that stuff is true, it's just going to disable. Okay, so let's go back in here. And we're going to create another script to get rid of that error real quick, and then we'll move on. Let's create a new script. We'll call this pointer dynamic color. Okay, within that script, the only thing this does is it just holds settings. So you don't need a start function, you don't need an update function, you just need that. So we'll go over this here in a second, but we just needed it to exist to get rid of those errors. So let's come back down to our left pointer and let's take our pointer switcher and put it on there. Then On our pointer switcher, we're on the left hand, so we want our left hand trigger. Left trigger, where are you? Left trigger. We need our cursor, which is this. Line renderer, you don't need to put anything. It'll get that on its own. And then we need it to be the left hand. And our layer mask is the layer we want it to see. Well, we only want it to see UI. And then our left trigger binding is our left trigger, and our right trigger binding is our right trigger. This will make sense in a second. And then same thing for our right hand pointer. Let's go ahead and point over our pointer switcher. Drop it on there. We need this to be right trigger. We need it to be on our right hand, and we need this to be UI. And again, our left trigger binding is left trigger and right trigger. Ooh, and we need to pull our cursor in. So from this point, we need to assign our other pointer. So see where it says other UI pointer. So right now I'm on this one, so I want my other UI pointer. And then if I click on my left one, I want my other UI pointer. So if you're on the left, you want it to be the right. If you're on the right, you want it to be the left. Okay, so next, let's come up to our UI example. Again, prefab. Unpack it. Remember, it's always good practice to unpack it when you're modifying a prefab if you do not want it to overwrite the original. So, on here, and let's go ahead and add a box collider. We want 3D, not 2D, and this looks kind of funky when it pops up there, but let's go ahead and increase our size on the Y. And then on the X. And then we'll decrease it on the Z. Okay, so basically you just want this to cover the entire canvas. So let's make it wider. Oops, Z. Let's make this wider. So X. Or you can do the grab handles. Just pull it out. Doot. Bring this down. And basically you want this thing to rest just behind it. You can adjust this in playtime, but you don't want it to be in front of your UI elements because it won't, your other raycaster, your graphics raycaster won't be able to see your graphics. So you just want it to be like right within a pixel, if you will, behind this thing. It doesn't even have to be that thick. It can be in. And then we're going to just make it a trigger. That way it has no physics. Okay, so let me check that out. So next, let's go back to our pointers and make sure we got everything set up right. We've got our UI pointer disabled. Let's come down to our right hand pointer, make sure it's disabled, and then make sure we have our cursor. Leave that blank. Where's my left hand pointer? Blank, we got cursor. Oops. And cursor. Okay, and for now I'm going to disable dynamic color until we get to that script. And now we can get rid of these UI pointers, so let's go ahead and remove that. And then down here we can remove that. Okay, so at this point you should have dual pointers. So see, if I just do this, and here's my other one. It's kind of hard to show, but it's basically switching in between the two. There you go. Okay, so at this point, if that's all you wanted to do, that's it. There's no more to it. You could remove the dynamic color and the haptics, but let's go over that real quick. So to get the dynamic color, let's go down to our button on our UI. down to our button. So on this, all we need to do is we need to put that script. So when you're pointing at it, it's going to look for this script, pointer dynamic color. And it's just going to find your colors. So remember, this is just to store data that it needs to know what color to change to. The other script will take care of it. It just needs to know what color you need to change the line renderer is when you point at this button. You can use this for like point and click, things like that. I just want to give you an example on how to do it so that you can expand off of it. So let's just make our start color something like red, and then our end color is, I don't know, yellow, and then our cursor color will be, I don't know, orange maybe, I don't know. There we go. Okay, so now when I point at this button, if I have dynamic color checked on it, it should change the colors. So let's see what happens. Oops, I forgot to set dynamic color on, so I turned it off. Hold on. Doop. So if we come down to our pointers, and you'll see it says use dynamic graphics color. And down here it says use dynamic graphics color. So let's see if it does it. So now when we hit the button, oh, it's just making them just, oh, and if you do that, I know exactly what that is because it confused me for a minute. If you come back down to your button, for some reason when you add a script with color, the transparency is turned all the way down. So just turn it up. I don't know why that would be. It's kind of the opposite of what you would want it to be, not to confuse people, but there it is. So turn that up, hit play. Now when we do it, we should get the dynamic color changing. There you go. And obviously if you turn the bool off for dynamic color changing, it won't use it at all. But this will allow you to change the color of your line rendering your cursor depending on what you're looking at. Now for haptics, let's create a new script. And you can combine these. I just separated them to make them more like a toolkit. And you know, obviously you're probably going to rewrite parts of these, but let's just create a new script, C# script, and we'll call this pointer hand side haptics. Okay, let's open that up. It's a pretty simple script. So basically this is just going to give you a, using BNG, way to send haptic feedback for whatever's pointing at it. So I'm just getting VR UI systems instance, and then it's just going to check and see which hand side it is, and then it's just going to run the do haptics when you run this pointer event. So how do we do that? Well, come on, mouse work. So let's go to your button. Let's find our button here, and we're going to need two things here. We're going to need pointer events. This gives you access to all the events associated with the button. So the on pointer click event, on pointer enter event, etc. Just gives you access to trigger things depending on what happens with this button, right? So let's say you want to run haptics when you do this. Again, I'm not going to go all the way down the line with all of them. I just want to give you an example on how this works. But let's take our UI pointer haptic script. Which one is it? Right? Yeah, pointer inside haptics. Yep, this one. So come back down to your button, and we're going to throw this on there as well. So I'm going to put it right here and make it easier. Okay, so this will allow you to set your frequency, amplitude, and duration for this button. So this will work for other things too, like when you go over other UI elements as well. It's just pointer events. It's just the events associated with this UI element. So what we want to do is when I enter it, so when I hover over it, I want it to give me haptic feedback. So I'm going to do an event here. I'm just going to pull this in, and I'm going to come down to my pointer hand side haptics, and then I'm going to do pointer event. So if you look at the script, you see it's just named pointer event, and it's just going to run it with our selection. So it's going to look and see what the actual hand side is. So it's looking at the VR UI system to see which hand is our dominant hand. So it's the one that we're pointing at it with. And then it's going to actually run the haptics on that one. And this is just so that it'll know if you're using your left or right hand to point at it. Just so you understand what's going on there. For this is just an instance with VRIF to run haptics. So I'm just passing the hand side from the VR UI instance to this and then telling it to vibrate my frequency, my amplitude, and my duration on the hand side that is currently my hand side of my VR UI system, which is my dominant hand that I'm pointing at it with. So now, if I come in here, I'm going to do this with my headset just to make sure that it works before I end this video, but we should be gold. Alright guys, we're good. As you can see, now we have our dual pointers and we can switch back and forth while we're on the canvas in real time. If I'm not doing any inputs, if I switch over, that's my dominant hand. If I pull this one off and I put that one on with no inputs, that's my dominant hand. If they're both at it, I can switch in between the two. And this gives me the dual pointers. With that, I hope you found this informative. I hope that you can modify these scripts to fit your needs, and you've added some functionality to VR Interaction Framework for your UI system. Have a good one. Till next time.